My 28F fiancé, 30M, confessed to a terrible secret right before our wedding. Now I don't know if I can marry him. My fiancé and I have been together for 5 years, engaged for 1, and we're supposed to get married in 2 months. Up until now, I thought our relationship was solid. Sure, we had normal ups and downs, but nothing that ever made me question our future together. But last week, he dropped a confession on me that has completely shattered my trust, and I don't know if I can go through with the wedding. The confession. Last Saturday night, we were having dinner at home when he got really quiet. He looked anxious, which isn't like him. He's usually the composed, logical type. I was halfway through eating when I noticed he hadn't touched his food at all. He was just staring at his plate, gripping his fork like he was trying to convince himself to speak. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting my fork down. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands together. "I need to tell you something, and it's not easy." Immediately, my stomach twisted. That phrase is never followed by good news. "Okay. Just say it," I said cautiously. He took another deep breath and said, 3 years ago, I had an emotional affair." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My ears started ringing. "What?" He looked at me with this guilt-ridden expression, like he'd been carrying this weight for years and was finally unloading it. I swear, it was never physical. But there was someone I was talking to at work. We got close, too close. I shouldn't have let it happen. And I need you to know before we get married. I was in shock. 3 years ago, we were in a rough patch. Our first year of living together had been challenging. We had frequent fights about small things, and I was stressed from my new job. But I never thought he had been confiding in someone else. "Who was it?" My voice was barely above a whisper. When he said her name, my stomach dropped even further. I knew her. She wasn't some faceless coworker. She was someone I had met multiple times at office parties, at group dinners. She was nice, friendly, charming. I never suspected a thing. I pushed back from the table, suddenly feeling nauseous. "How far did it go?" He hesitated. "We never kissed, we never slept together. But we texted a lot, sometimes late at night. She was there when I was frustrated about us, and I vented to her. We went out to dinner a few times, just the two of us. But it was never a date?" I finished for him bitterly. He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't see it that way at the time, but I get why it looks like that. Did you have feelings for her?" He hesitated. And that hesitation spoke volumes. "At the time, I was confused." I scoffed. "Confused? I never stopped loving you," he said quickly, his voice desperate. "But when things were rough between us, I liked how easy it felt to talk to her. She understood me in a way that, at the time, I didn't feel like you did. But the second she told me she had feelings, I ended it. I realized I didn't want anyone but you." "And you decided to keep it a secret for 3 years?" I felt so guilty. I wanted to tell you, but I thought it would only hurt you. And then time passed, and it felt like I had buried it. But now that we're getting married, I couldn't walk into this without you knowing everything. Why it hurts so much. Update 1. I sat there in silence, trying to process it all. It felt like my entire understanding of our relationship had just been rewritten. I keep going back to the fact that he only ended things when she confessed to having feelings. If she had never said anything, would he have continued talking to her? Would he have kept her as his harmless emotional escape? And then, of course, there's the deception. He spent 3 years pretending like everything was fine while I was completely in the dark. He had let me meet this woman, laugh with her, trust her. And he only told me now because he felt guilty, not because he respected me enough to tell me earlier. I got up from the table, pacing. "Do you know how humiliating this is for me?" I said. I know, and I hate myself for it," he said, standing up too. "But it's in the past. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake, and I've done everything I can to be a better man since then." "That's the problem," I snapped. "You got to move on. You got to process your guilt while I was living in ignorance. Now you're dumping it on me and expecting me to what? Just get over it immediately?" He looked genuinely torn. "I don't expect anything. I didn't want to marry you with this lie between us. Where do I go from here?" Update 2. For the past week, I've been an emotional wreck. Some moments, I tell myself that it was 3 years ago, that it was just emotional, that he's been a good partner since. Other moments, I feel like a fool for ever trusting him. I keep cycling through these thoughts. If it was only emotional, does that make it okay? Would I be throwing away a solid relationship over something that technically never crossed a physical boundary? Or is this a sign of something deeper? He was capable of hiding something like this for years. Would he hide something else in the future? Would I ever be able to look at him the same way? The worst part is, I still love him. I don't want to walk away from our entire life together over this, but I also don't know if I can just pretend everything is fine. I haven't told anyone in my personal life yet, because I know once I do, it'll change how people see him forever. But I also don't want to make this decision alone. Would you still marry him? Or is this something that would be unforgivable for you? Final update, 1 year later. It's been a full year since I left my ex, and I can confidently say that walking away was the best decision I have ever made. If you had told me back then that I would be where I am today, happier, stronger, and in a relationship that feels completely different, I wouldn't have believed you. Leaving was terrifying. I remember the first few months feeling completely lost. It wasn't just the heartbreak, it was the sudden shift in my entire future. I had spent 5 years planning a life with someone, picturing our wedding, our home, our future kids. And in an instant, that future was gone. But what I didn't realize at the time was that I wasn't losing a future, I was freeing myself to build a better one. My ex tried to come back, of course he did. I wish I could say my ex let me go gracefully, but that's not how it went. About 2 months after I ended things, he started texting me. At first, it was casual, "Hey, I hope you're doing okay." Then, it escalated. He sent me long, guilt-ridden messages about how he had been doing so much work on himself and how therapy had made him realize how much he took me for granted. He wrote about how he was a changed man, how he finally saw what I meant about trust and honesty. The biggest red flag? He never once said, "I understand why you left." It was always about how he felt, how he had improved, how he had suffered from the breakup. I never responded. I didn't see the point. Then, about 5 months after the breakup, he reached out again, this time to tell me he was dating someone new. I'm pretty sure he was hoping I'd be jealous, but instead, I just felt sorry for her. I hoped she wouldn't have to learn the same lesson I did. That was the last time I heard from him. And honestly, it was a relief. Meeting someone who treats me right. A few months after I went no contact with my ex, I started casually dating again. I wasn't looking for anything serious, I just wanted to remind myself what it felt like to go on a date without baggage weighing me down. And then, completely unexpectedly, I met Daniel. Daniel is nothing like my ex. Where my ex was defensive, Daniel listens. Where my ex dismissed my feelings, Daniel validates them. Where my ex kept secrets, Daniel is open about everything. One of the first things I noticed was how safe I felt with him. I never had to wonder if he was hiding something, never had to worry about emotional boundaries being crossed. He is consistent, emotionally mature, and, most importantly, he actually respects me. The biggest moment of clarity came about 6 months into dating him. We had a small disagreement about something, honestly, I can't even remember what it was, and I felt myself automatically preparing for defensiveness, for gaslighting, for some sort of emotional manipulation. Instead, he just said, "I get why you feel that way. I don't want you to feel like I'm dismissing your emotions. Let's talk about it." I think I stared at him for a full 10 seconds before realizing, oh, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. For the first time in my life, I was with someone who didn't make me feel like I was too much for having emotions. Someone who saw communication as something we do together, not as a battle to win. And I can't even put into words how healing that has been. What I've learned in a year. 1. If you have to convince yourself to trust someone, you don't actually trust them. I spent years trying to believe my ex was honest with me, but deep down, I always had that nagging doubt. With Daniel, I don't have to convince myself of anything, his actions show me every day that I can trust him. 2. Apologies without changed behavior mean nothing. My ex said he regretted what he did. But when I told him I needed time, he got defensive. When I hesitated about the wedding, he lashed out. When he reached out after the breakup, it was all about him. Regret without real accountability is just empty words. 3. Emotional cheating is real, and it matters. Some people will say, at least it wasn't physical. But let me tell you, knowing the person you love has been emotionally intimate with someone else, sharing parts of themselves that should have been yours, is devastating. Emotional intimacy is just as sacred as physical intimacy in a relationship. 4. Love shouldn't feel like a battle. With my ex, I'd always felt like I was fighting for something, fighting to be heard, fighting for reassurance, fighting to be enough. With Daniel, there's no battle. There's no competition. There's just mutual care, respect, and effortless love. 5. Leaving was hard, but staying would have been harder. I won't lie, leaving someone you love is painful. But staying with someone who makes you question your worth? Who makes you feel crazy for having standards? That pain would have lasted forever. The day that was supposed to be my wedding came and went. I thought I'd feel sad when it arrived, but honestly, I felt free. Instead of walking down the aisle toward a man who had betrayed my trust, I spent that day with my best friends, celebrating a life I built for myself. We had a girls' trip to a cabin, drank wine by the fire, and toasted to making choices that honor ourselves. And I have never been more grateful for the life I chose. To anyone who's struggling to leave. If you're in a relationship where you constantly feel uneasy, where trust feels like something you have to force instead of something that comes naturally, please know that there is better out there. You don't have to settle for someone who almost treats you right. You don't have to stay with someone just because you've already invested years into them. You are not overreacting for wanting a partner who respects your boundaries, your emotions, and your trust. You deserve someone who makes love feel easy, not like something you have to earn. I didn't believe it at first, but now I do. The right love doesn't make you question yourself. It just feels right. And for the first time in my life, I finally have that. Subscribe to storychan for more stories.